welcome, Ben David Normann.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can I just ask, do you normally call yourself Ben David or just Ben?
Well, at work it's Ben. So
Ben.
in the family it's Ben David.
Right.
In
Okay.
Norway it's typical to have two names,
It
but
is.
at work
Yeah.
that's too complicated. So
Yeah, I know. But at least you've got two English names, so that's nice and easy for me.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if I'll call you Ben then, if that's okay.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
really nice to speak to you. I first saw you a couple of weeks ago at the TEDx event in Stavanger, and to be honest, your presentation blew my mind. It was so interesting, and I don't think I'm going to attempt to try and sort of like summarize it, because it was, it's astrophysics, and this is outside of my field or realm of experience, but extremely interesting. But if I maybe say what I think, I understood from it was that you've calculated the universe, right, more than once, if I understand correctly, how it all fits together, and you figured out that it's a great big sausage, right? And you can explain that, as we proceed into our chat. But what I think I understood from what you said was that no matter that, we've got this massive cosmos, and no matter that you can define all of that by using statistics and mathematics and all of that, that the human mind is still almost more complex and powerful, if I've understood correctly. Like you were kind of referring to, your unborn son, I think, and how, no matter what the math says, that you would do anything for that child. There's no maths that can potentially define that. So I'd love to hear more about that as we chat. But I thought, as I was watching you, how interesting it was, because a lot of what I do is think about things in terms of business, how businesses work, how people in businesses work. And I'm also extremely interested in, in the cosmos, in the universe, in the idea that there is invisible matter that we don't even understand. And I was thinking that it would be fun to chat with you to find out, what you might know or what you might think about how these things affect business, how these things affect the people that are in the businesses. And so therefore we're here today for this interesting and once one of a kind chat, because I've never spoken to an astrophysicist before, I have to say. So I wanted,
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, Ben, if you could maybe then just introduce yourself and say a bit about yourself and what you do, and then we can launch into some questions.
Right, thank you. Well, thank you for inviting. I'm really excited to be here.
Thanks.
This is I think the first time I do a chat like this,
right?
Which is a great experience for me.
Good.
So I currently work at the University of Stavanger, where I at least stay here for 1 year. We'll see what happens after that.
Okay.
And I'm teaching astronomy currently this semester. And besides, I am also planning a conference, which is seems to be a lot of work to be done there, relating to Corona and all those things.
Yeah.
And I'm also trying to do some more research, like you say, based on this sausage theory. I actually never came up with that idea myself. But,
okay. Right.
It's like a sausage.
You have to explain the sausage though, because I don't think otherwise people will understand what you mean.
Yeah, sure. You want me to go ahead with that, or
yeah, no, you finish what you were saying, and then we'll get back to the sausage.
Right. Yes. Well, I'm a married man, no children yet, but as I said in one of these TEDx talks, we are expecting in December actually.
Yeah.
So that will be, I think, a life-changing event. So I've been working on gravity. Einstein's theory of gravity, and like you touched on too, there is a lot of mysterious matter in the universe. So what we really have done is to try to make a guess of what this mysterious matter is.
Right.
I actually did draw down the equation here for you to see.
Now I understand. Well, it's quite a small equation, isn't it? Actually.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Very elegant.
It's a neat little inch.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, now I know. Yeah.
So what it really says is that the space and time, that's what you have on the left-hand side, is related to matter, to stuff like me and you and planets and galaxies, etc.
Okay.
We are sort of trying to sort that out, to find out what sort of matter is there actually in the universe.
Yeah, it's so honestly so fascinating. Do you have any kind of like big clues? Like, I mean, I've read before about things like string theory and stuff. Is that still a relevant theory, or is that kind of out now and in with something else?
Actually, it's funny that you mention it, because I just had this very interesting chat with one of my colleagues, and he is an expert on string theory.
Right.
And it turns out, none of us knew, I think, but it turns out that the things that I've been working on from a totally different side of things,
yeah,
might be, and I have to stress, might be related to what he is doing in string theory.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that
That's
is sort
amazing.
of yeah, that's amazing actually, because after all, if we could make a connection from string theory, which is today a purely mathematical theory, we don't really know whether this has anything to do with physics or not. But if we could make that connection and show that, well, indeed, if string theory is correct, it has to produce this sorts of observables, this sort of universe, and then we can go out there and check, well, that's actually what we see, or it's not. So that's a very interesting and intriguing thought that we have going there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad I asked that then. You know, the reason I know a little bit about string theory, only that I've read some books about it, like, you know, not recently, but a while ago, because I just thought, what an interesting idea at least. So my goodness, what an interesting field you work in. So it's fascinating. So I mean, I love to follow your work, and you know, as you progress and find out more about these discoveries of yours, to actually kind of follow what's happening, because it's a like complete cutting edge, really, isn't it, of trying to explain what's going on in our big wide world and a big wide universe. So
yeah,
so, maybe you could explain this idea of the sausage, just so people understand what we're referring to there.
Yeah, I would be happy to. Well, so there's so that's the analogy there, to sort of imagine it as a sausage, is something that I didn't come up with, but I think that's actually a good way to view it, because after all, the universe, one of the universes that we were looking at, seemed to expand in that fashion. I can draw it on the blackboard if that's a whiteboard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turning this into a lecture instead.
Yeah, but this is great. I get my own lecture on astrophysics and the cosmology.
You know, if this is the universe as a just after the Big Bang, it's very, very small and hot and dense.
Yeah.
Now, the standard theory says that it expanded just like this and grew larger and larger and larger.
Yeah.
Now, in our theory, we do not make the assumption that it had to happen in the same fashion in all directions. So it is not a small ball growing bigger and bigger, or like a balloon.
Yeah.
But it is those, you know, balloons that look like this. So it's starting perhaps as a small point and it's growing like this. Right. Like a sausage, you know, a cylinder, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not growing as much in this direction as in this direction.
No, but why do you think people assumed at first that it was growing out like a round balloon? Why would we make that assumption, do you think?
That's a very good question, and I did get that. Well, actually, I got the question the other way around in my PhD defense,
right?
Which was this summer, and the professor asked, "Well, why do you? What is this whole business about thinking that the universe doesn't have to grow equally much in all directions?"
Yeah.
So he turned the question around and said that I had to justify why it should not be the case. But actually, it is your question that is the correct one, because from a mathematical point of view, this is an assumption.
Yeah.
You can't, there is nothing in the theory that says that the universe should grow equally much in all directions. No. And actually, it's infinitely unlikely that that should happen.
Right.
Unless you have a very, very particular kind of matter. And we think that this matter is in the universe. And that is the reason why people make this assumption.
Right.
Now, one could work the other way around and say, well, but what if we do not make that assumption? Do we then need all this extra matter? Do we then need the dark energy, etc.? So that's what we are doing. We are starting the other way around and looking to what sort of matter content we need in the universe to explain what we see.
Yeah, gosh, so interesting. And I think one of the reasons that I asked that question is that you know, one of the things that interests me is that why do we jump to these conclusions? I mean, maybe as scientists are better at not just jumping to the conclusions because you like to prove, you know, you like to prove your theories. But I think us in business or in kind of like regular life are very prone to sort of making an assumption and then that's the truth. And I just wondered what you think about that. Is there a way that, you know, that you could recommend that people avoid that trap or that fallacy?
Yeah, I was thinking about that before this interview, and I think really, to me, it comes down to, do we dare to question our own sort of self-made truths?
Yeah.
Do we dare to question them? You know, some of them are very dear to us, and we don't, like, for instance, if I were to question that, I don't know, gravity pulls things down.
Yeah.
You know, I can easily check that.
Yeah.
Well, it does every time I check it. So I'm not able to doubt that.
No.
But if other things like, and I guess one can find plenty of examples in business on things that you take for granted. For instance, that it is morally justifiable to, I don't know, sell cigarettes when you actually have ample evidence that cigarettes or smoking kills you, right? And all those questions that you just continue to work within that paradigm, that this is okay, until the external pressure becomes too great, and all of a sudden your paradigm breaks down and it's not okay anymore. So I think the key thing that scientists are good at is this whole business of questioning.
Right.
Like taking a certain idea and asking, is this actually how it is?
Yeah, stopping to really think about it and asking it in maybe different ways and maybe more than once, over and over.
Right.
And I guess in business, we're often too much in a hurry. Like, you know, there's no time.
Yeah.
You know, of course, sometimes there is. Of course, sometimes one stops and has a good conversation. But I'm thinking how much more value we would get from our decisions if we think about things in different contexts for a little while, you know, before we jump to the obvious conclusion. And so there's a lot to learn, I think, from the way that you approach your science.
And it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I think the key question then becomes, is one as a businessman or businesswoman willing to sacrifice that income that you probably will sacrifice then, because you have an opportunity, right? And you just have to take it there, or you'll lose it.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess that will come with a cost. So you might not earn that first billion dollars as rapidly as you otherwise would have. So it's sort of, I guess, perhaps one can say that this is a question about what is the goal of business and what is the goal of science in general. And maybe the goals are a bit different, like you say, that we are more prone to actually asking all those questions, trying to find out, you know, we have a universe out there, it's already there, it's set, and we can't make anything new. So all we can do is trying to describe that. Whereas you guys can always make something new, right? So if you have this amazing idea that will turn you into a billionaire, it's of course very, I guess, very easy to just jump on that train and take that opportunity when it's there before somebody else does it.
Yeah, no, that's true. But now you've made me think of the idea of if the universe is already there and we're in the universe, are our ideas already there somewhere, do you think? Or are we really creating something new?
Wow, that's an excellent question.
Now
I think
I'm getting very philosophical, aren't I?
yeah, and I like that, because actually when you say it, I think it's good that you arrested me, because that's one of the fallacies I think most philosophers would agree that we, at least as physicists, fall into, is that we take it for granted that the universe is already out there.
Right.
Perhaps even that is not true, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps, I mean, how would I even prove that the universe that I see is the same as the one you see?
Yeah.
Or how would I even prove that you exist outside this Skype talk? You know,
how do you know? That's right.
How do I know?
I'm just here in your computer and that's it.
Precisely.
Yeah, but I mean, God, these sorts of things, they're so fascinating to think about, aren't they? And I think we, you know, I don't know, I know I sort of love stretching my mind a little bit and wondering about stuff like that. But you're right. How do you know? How do we know it all? Anything really? But you know, that maybe comes to my idea of, or the question I have about, well, number one, actually, I would like to ask you if you have any good techniques for questioning, because obviously, you know, you do all this questioning. So does it just come naturally to you as a scientist, or is it something that you've got some kind of mental tricks or mental hooks where you can think about, yeah, I should ask this and this and this, you know, like I don't know, anything, any tips on that, or how we can
what first comes to mind is there's what's it called, is one of these games, you know, I don't know if it's an IQ game or whatever you call it in English. There's you know, you put something together, or you're trying to pull a ring from a thread or something.
Oh yeah, like one of those puzzle, like mind puzzles. Yeah.
Mind puzzles. Yeah, precisely. So what comes to mind is one of these mind puzzles, which I was actually attempting at yesterday. And how did I succeed at it? I finally did. And the way I did was by starting from, well, I started by with the question, what do I actually know?
Right.
You know, so because it's very easy to just sit there and fiddle with all these things, and well, this one may go here and there, and you need this creative phase as well. But then at some point you have to ask, what do I actually know? What information is there in this system or this problem?
Right.
So get all the information that is relevant on the table. I think that's step number one. Get all the information that is relevant. But then you also need a step number 0, because you need, in order to know what is relevant, you have to define the problem, right? So if you don't know what the problem is, then it's very hard to find the information that is relevant.
That's true, yeah. Because it would be impossible, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's a good strategy even for exams, right? You have to understand the problem. What is actually the problem here?
Yeah.
And I think that's true for business as well. If you want to start a business or in, I don't know, whatever industry, maybe for some people, their honest intention is to become rich. I don't know if that's true, for how many people that would be true or not, but let's assume that that's true for some people.
Yeah.
Then maybe they would jump on any opportunity that will progress them on this road, right? Because their problem, or if you like, the goal that they are stretching after is, or they want to solve the problem of becoming rich.
Right. Yeah.
Now one has to take a step back, I think, and ask, is that the right problem to solve? Like me yesterday, should I actually have sat down with that mind puzzle, instead of preparing my lectures? Probably not.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But it's fun, right?
It is. It's a lot of fun, right? Precisely. And sometimes that justifies it. Other times not, right?
Yeah, because you might have solved something else as you were sitting there with that puzzle, letting your mind relax and reel a little bit.
Yeah. So, but I think it really comes down to that as a number 0 step is to define the problem. Do know what your problem is, which I think emerges from knowing what the goal is. And I mean, if to relate it to business, and then get all the facts on the table. And when you have all the facts on the table, if you don't know how to progress, then I think one should go into sort of this creative process where you probably need a lot of other people. That's what I think.
Right.
Because if you have, the more minds you have that work together, the better the creative stimuli is, I think.
Yeah.
And then my view is that or my opinion at least, or experience, is that the problem will be solved in due time if it is solvable.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you know, one needs to be a little patient and a bit organized then, really.
Yeah. I think so.
And to not just storm ahead and assume that things are going to sort themselves out, because I think if I had one of those puzzles, knowing what I'm like, I probably would have just gone straight into it and probably failed a few times, or quite a few times, and then maybe eventually get to the end. But I know from past experience, I probably would, you know, struggle with just looking at the puzzle and thinking about the problem and the goal, and thinking about what I knew and what I didn't know, because it's not my natural, I suppose, modus operandus. But there's a lot to be learned from that. This is a way that one can train potentially to become better at making, you know, good decisions and solving problems in a more scientific way or a systemized way that you can then repeat, you know, again and again, kind of thing, that you can get better
and
at.
then you have sort of found a mental algorithm that you can use in order to, you can apply it to whatever. And I think that's the key thing we learn, even if you don't go on becoming professors in mathematics and physics. The key thing you learn in mathematics and physics is really this problem solving sort of skill set.
Right. And what's interesting actually as well is that, you know, for you, after December, as your little baby gets born and starts growing up, and I've got 2 girls, you know, this is something that could really help them, I'm thinking, in school. Like my kids are 7 and 10, and you know, they often are coming back with obviously things that they're trying to figure out, whether that be social things, whether that be things around the homework or the schoolwork. But this is something, a very simple way, isn't it, of breaking it down for a kid, you know, 3 simple things to consider here. And if you just think about those 3 things, like what's the problem, you know, what are you trying to achieve, and what do you know? And then let's make a brainstorm together. That's 3 things or 3 tactics that one could learn them or teach them that could help them. So I like that. I like that stuff.
Now I should take notes.
Now you should take notes. You did say that, didn't you, in your TEDx talk? You said
I did.
Ask for something that you should teach your kid. You went when he comes. Yeah. So, or it is a boy, is it not a girl, or maybe that?
It is a boy, a little boy.
Yeah.
So
So there you go.
To
now you know what you need to teach him when he comes along.
Precisely.
How to solve problems. So that's great. Now you mentioned earlier about the intention, like, you know, the business person who may have an intention of just getting rich, and maybe that's a good intention or not, you know, but do you think it's possible to hide that intention from the universe? Because I think a lot of people would probably know that it's probably not the done thing to say they're just in business just to make money, you know, certainly not these days. It probably wouldn't go down very well. In fact, one thing I'm studying is this thing called, or this concept called integrated reporting, and it's all about how we're using what we have in the world, you know, all these different resources, be it, you know, the environment, be it the human intellectual, be it financial, be it whatever. How do we put that through the business and come out the other end with something of more value? Are we doing that, or are we trashing, you know, the resources we have? So what I'm thinking is that with that mindset, very much the mindset of let's create more value in the universe, not less. Can one pretend, you know, if one really is just motivated by the money, can one get away with pretending or hiding that intention? Or do you think somewhere in all this dark matter or whatever it is that you're trying to calculate that's out there, it holds the information that we're sort of emitting from our intentions, regardless of the fact whether we say it in words? What do you think about that?
Wow, that's really deep, I think, and I love it. I didn't know the answer, unfortunately. I wish I did.
Okay, well, that's your next thing you need to study then, right?
Right. Yes. And actually, that's
okay. Well then, that's a fair enough answer. You know, that's a fair enough.
Yeah.
Better
but I also think that sort of I mean, even if it turns out that, well, I would probably be most proud to think that it will turn out in due time that actually you can hide it from the dark matter or whatever it would be out there. But another question, an interesting question is, can I hide it from myself?
Right.
And can I hide it from other people?
Yeah.
But if you start with that first question, can I hide it from myself? I think that is harder than we think. And if we do that, the way we can do that is really to kill a part of ourselves. Right. Well, now I'm saying that if your intention is to earn money, that's not necessarily a bad intention.
Well,
so, but let's see,
don't we?
Yeah. So let's say it's something is totally bad, like you will earn money, whatever, even if it's killing people, you'll just do it because your prime goal is to earn money. Then I think all of us actually are born with this compass that we know morally that this is not ethically sustainable. Yeah. And the way to get rid of that feeling and to go on living your life is really to kill that part of yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And one can, I think, make the connection between this moral compass and the universe out there, because after all, the processes, so it seems at least, if the theory of evolution is correct, the processes of the natural laws have given or has sort of built this into us. So in some sense, it at least, well, I don't know if one should say that it derives from nature or the natural laws. Actually, that's something I would not say.
Okay.
But it builds on the natural laws nevertheless.
Yeah.
But yet, I think perhaps that the more, well, this is my opinion, that the more interesting question in that respect would be, can I hide it from myself and can I hide it from others? And I think I can even sometimes feel like, well, your intentions are not quite okay, you know?
Yeah.
And I can feel that in myself as well. So maybe that's the question we need to answer.
That's a really super interesting question. I never really thought about it that way before, as to whether or not I could hide something from myself. And maybe you can for a little while, but not in the longer term, I don't think, because there are lots of different versions of ourselves, aren't there? And maybe something you're trying to hide kind of fits conveniently with one version, but it doesn't sort of like it doesn't resonate with the whole of you, so as you say, either you have to change, or either you do change, or naturally speaking, you have to admit that you can't hide it anymore. It's a horrible secret. Or having secrets isn't good anyway, is it? Especially not from yourself.
Exactly. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Really,
I like that.
Way.
And
so,
also
no, you go.
No, I'm just thinking that also what you said about adding value is really a critical point, because is that what we do? I mean, even as scientists, we have to ask ourselves that question. Is where my last paper was, that really about adding something of scientific value, or was it not? Right. And I think now I'm going to be a bit bold, but I'm sort of thinking that maybe we have learned a bit too much from the business side of things here, which has sort of been sneaking into science, telling us that, you have to produce papers, you have to, get promoted, you have to do all these steps that you naturally would think are valuable from a business point of view, or even just in terms of seniority, or really getting there, being headed somewhere in life. And maybe that is destroying academia ever so slightly, that we have this press or publication, for instance. And then we also have to, in the end, consider that question: am I actually adding value to the scientific community or not? So that's a very relevant question, also in science, whether we have in here. Pardon?
How do you know the answer to that? Like if you consider you release a paper and you consider maybe does it add value? How do you decide that? Is it based on how it's received, or is it based on how you feel about it, or what is it based on, or is it different?
Well, that's a excellent question, and I think actually it is more the latter, than how you feel about it. Sometimes you just know that this is not a great contribution. I just need to get it out there to get a paper.
Just to take.
And that is possible.
Yeah. Well, in a way, it's a shame, isn't it, that science has had to kind of like borrow that trait from business. This production, this idea of production.
Yeah.
But I guess it's it's not uncommon in many different walks of life. I'm thinking science and business and art, I guess, as well.
Right.
Sort of feeling this pressure to prove ourselves in some shape or form, and one way of doing that is by showing the world that you can give something out, like whether it's words or a picture or whatever else it might be. So
precisely.
It's a big pressure, though. It's a big pressure, isn't it? It's almost like the whole social media conversation that we have around the kids these days, of this idea of having to show up with something constantly to feel value. To be of value. But let's think about the nicer side of the value, though, the fact that maybe the papers that you're putting out and the things that we do in business, and that we are actually creating something that wasn't there before, that is changing the world in a positive way, hopefully. And if it doesn't change something in a positive way or add value, that we can learn from that as well and think, okay, well, then I have to do better next time. Because what I'm always trying to work with my customers and people in business about is the idea of we don't, you know, we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to show ourselves because we're not. But if we can show ourselves as moving in the right direction, and we do that with data, you know, that's how, because we're working in the, you know, in the arena of business intelligence and taking data and turning it into great information that people can hopefully make good decisions from.
Right.
If we can show from that data that, no, it wasn't so good, but look how it was last year, you know, then it was much better. You know, you're on the up, the curve is going in the right direction. That's good enough, isn't it? You know, and that has to be something to be proud of, even if it's not perfect. So
I totally agree. Yeah.
So
definitely.
your papers and these newsletters and blogs and this and that and the rest, they're opening up something that is almost like a yardstick you can use for the next thing, which might one hopes or not.
Definitely. And I think that's also very, like you say, it's a very important realization that I mean, even if you never make any particular contribution to science, if you spend your whole life trying, that is in some sense good enough, right? Because, or I mean, it doesn't have to be science or whatever field you're in, but you at least you tried. So maybe sometimes I've been thinking maybe again, this is about asking the right questions, right? And maybe the right, because we have to take a step back and ask, what is value? How do I add value to the universe? What is worth anything here? And one thing, at least, that does have a tremendous value to all of us is I think our moral integrity. So if I know that I can get super rich by killing my neighbor, then if I go and do that, I might get super rich, and some people will say that now I'm worth $100 billion bucks or whatever, and I have added money to my bank account, but have I actually added value to, I don't know, the universe or to humankind?
That is,
and I think I will know inside that I haven't. I have just taken value, if you like, from my moral integrity and degraded that value into money. And people will call me rich, even though I'm actually much poorer now than I used to be before I became rich. So this transaction of the moral integrity into cash is, I think, one of the problems, at least here.
Yeah, gosh, you're so right, because you know, if you think about it, like in business with a balance sheet where you have, like, you know, the things you own and the things you owe, and they've got to balance to zero. And what we're saying here is that by taking your moral integrity and changing it into cash, suddenly you're completely out of balance, because the cash actually is worth so much less than your moral integrity, isn't it? And I don't think anyone can argue about that. That's just the truth. You can't buy moral integrity in a way. So if you try and swap it for cash, you're going to be like, your balance sheet is never going to balance. That's a really good way of looking at it. And I think maybe another way of looking at value as well is, on top of the idea of it being your own moral integrity, is to also ask people what they want, because I think that's another area we fall up in business, or we go wrong, or we're not necessarily wrong, but we prevent ourselves from going right, is that we fail to ask the people around the business what they really want. Like, we don't ask enough of our customers what they want. We don't ask the society, we don't ask our employees, we don't ask the world, you know. We just assume we know. We assume we know what we need to deliver, and we do that. And sometimes we don't. But I think if we were to stop and actually go out to the stakeholders and actually go and say, what is important to you, you know, with what we're doing in the business, like what could we do more of that would give you greater value? I think we would probably learn a lot more as well, a bit like what you were saying about earlier about getting a lot of people together to solve the puzzle. I think we could do that, and it would add a huge amount to the value, hopefully. That we create. So
and I think that one of the secrets is and I might be very wrong on this one, because I'm not a businessman. So maybe this is why I will stay poor my whole life. I don't know. But but I think that going down that road will actually make you I mean, a greater net worth also in terms of money, because you will actually, like you say, you will know what people need, and you will provide it in such a way that they feel like they have been taken care of. And that is perhaps the problem with that road, is probably that it's hard for people to recognize that in today's world, because somebody will just do it cheaper, and you don't recognize that the quality of this product is actually much poorer than what you are delivering. But if they actually had that information, well, this product seems to be the same as this one, but it's half the price, and I'll go for this one. But if you had the information that the quality is less, then you would, I think, be much more proud to actually taking the high quality product. So in that sense, if one actually goes out there and shows care to one's customers, and of course this is something that can, and I think is, being abused as well, but nevertheless it is the truth that we all want to be taken care of. We want to be taken seriously, to be seen, right? So if I go to the store and I feel, well, there was a good service here, I got all my needs covered in terms of what this product was, what's the price, which one is the best, etc., then I'll buy there just for that fact. I got the best service there.
Yeah, you're right. We buy the service, don't we? We do. I do that all the time. Like, even if I go into a shop and I don't really want something, if the service is nice, I'll come out with something, nice.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah,
and a good feeling as well. So it's a really good point. Gosh, there's so many kind of dimensions to this conversation that is so interesting, and a lot of it's boiling down to the fact that you can't measure a lot of these things because they're completely intangible. I mean, I'm just wondering that, actually, what do you think? Because you calculate the universe, you calculate, you have this a beautiful equation behind you. Is that what you call it? Like an equation? Yeah,
an equation, that's right. Yes.
You have that there that's so elegant and neat, and it's probably come from millions of calculations, all kind of like nicely sewn down into one nice neat equation. But
actually this is just Einstein's equation.
Oh, is that Einstein's? Okay.
Yes, and so he actually wrote it down on his own, but you're right, he did use the mathematics of others. So he could never have done it without others.
Yeah, amazing. And I imagine he did all of that, I'm assuming, without a computer that he didn't, or a calculator. So what about these intangibles that we just spoke about, which are a big issue or a big thing in business? Because today, when you're looking at a business, it's often valued based on the things that you can see. So the cash they have, the machines they have, and various other things. But more and more now, there's a movement towards the idea of these intangible assets, so all these wonderful things that you cannot see and touch in the business, and that they do have a value. But right now, you can't see that on a balance sheet of a business. You cannot see that, right? So what I'm thinking is that, do you think it's possible to measure accurately intangible? So could you measure a relationship? Could you measure a human being? Could you measure something that you cannot see, do you think? Or do you think probably not? It's too complex. And
well, yeah, I think in general you can measure a lot of things that you don't see. For instance, dark matter. That's actually why we call it dark. It's because we don't see it. But like, I guess the way you actually meant it in terms of this, like you say, the relationship, can I measure a relationship, and then sort of these abstract things?
Yeah,
I think that is an excellent point, that we can't, or at least. I'm not going to make this statement that we can't, but at least we should not assume that we can.
Right.
And in any way, we can't do it at present. And I don't think we will ever be able to do that. But some other scientists will, of course, disagree with me on that. But why would we assume that we can calculate everything? And I think if one wants to make that assumption, that is an assumption that has to be justified. And I actually use that often as an example of, put it this way, even if somebody can calculate why I love my wife, or they can scan my brain and they can find out, well, you love this person, you hate that person, even if that is possible, and to some degree I think that's possible, that doesn't really help me, because I already know in here that I love my wife. And I already know that I trust her, and no calculation could add anything to that.
No.
Any calculation would be of zero worth to me, because my certainty would come from my own experiences, and nothing could change that, right? Of course, I could get other experiences which would cause me to change that opinion, but a calculation wouldn't change that.
No.
So I
what
think
we're
that's
saying is very subjective. It's subjective, and you can't measure that. You know, it is what it is.
Precisely.
Yeah, and you might be different on different days, even, like, you know, on a day where you, well, no, I'm sure you love your wife just as much every day. But what I'm saying is that, you know, say for example, you really like sailing as well, for example, and nobody could calculate that, because you know subjectively or inside yourself that that's something you enjoy, but on some days maybe you just don't feel like it. And so the calculation would also never be really probably able to keep up with that. You know, how is Ben today, you know? And it would be a time as well, as you say. There's probably better things that we could calculate. But it's a really interesting idea, isn't it? Because it's like, you know, I think that's why businesses struggle a little bit with valuing these intangible assets, as we call them, because there is no right way of doing it, because what somebody values is not the same as what somebody else values anyway. So no wonder businesses, us poor business people, with all these intangible problems to deal with. But actually it's kind of fun, because I think what we're beginning to realize in business is that most of the value is not on the balance sheet. You cannot see it in any financial statement, because it doesn't exist. Very interesting. Yeah. So I think it is interesting, and I think the more you know we go forwards, and the more conscious and awake we become about what we're really doing, the more we realize that we just know a fraction, really. You know, we just know a small, a tiny bit about what we're really worth in terms of business, in terms of people, in terms of what we're producing, because it's immeasurable. It's very
that's very interesting, because that's also the trend, you know, in astrophysics. Now we used to know so much about the universe, and actually at the turn of the previous century, it was I think the common thought that now we are, well, what we really need to do now is just to fill in the gaps. You know, we are mapped out the whole universe, we know the galaxy, etc. And it turns out that there are 2,000 billion other galaxies out there, and it turns out that we only know about 5% of the energy content in the universe. So the more we have got to know, we do know a whole deal more now, but that does also reveal how little we actually know out of the grander whole of things. And I think that comes back to the mind, right? That we like you started by saying, we don't really have a clue about what the mind is, and that's not the brain. So we mustn't confuse the mind with the brain, because the brain, you may scan the brain and you can see that, well, this person likes apples, I'm gonna sell apples to him. But you can't actually access the mind by any physical process like that, I don't think.
No, my goodness. Now I feel that I could talk to you for literally hours. I won't do that, but I think that this whole idea of the mind is just so fascinating, isn't it? Like, what on earth is that? Where does it go, and does it die, or does it carry on? And all of these amazing questions that you know that I certainly have. I can't, you know, I watch a lot of these kind of documentaries and read a lot of books, because I just think it's just so fascinating. And I agree, we have no idea, really, do we? And if the universe could think, you know, if the universe could think itself, it was probably been laughing its head off at us for so long. If, you know, all those years that we thought we had it all sorted and calculated and in its box. At least now, as you say, we realize that we really don't know much at all. We just know a little fraction, don't we? And it's a fascinating pursuit to try and just know a little bit more, and a little bit more in our lifetime that we can then pass on.
And I think it's also, like you say, I mean that question, you could also say that, well, there is thinking in the universe, at least. So in some sense you could say that the universe does think, but is there sort of a grand being that thinks, or is the universe something more? And that also brings in the moral question. There is actually a cosmologist, you should check him out. George Ellis is a very famous cosmologist, and I won't try to give away his thoughts. I might misrepresent him, but he has some ideas about the moral law, if you like, in the universe actually in some sense being more fundamental than the physical bits and parts. So you can't really go from, you know, bottom up, trying to take one quark and one electron, etc., and build the universe. Then you will never get to like the mind and morals and things like that. You have to go the other way. So there is something outside of us which is more fundamental in terms of this attributes of the mind, like thinking and rationals and morals. And I happen to agree with him on that.
I agree too. I do.
Right.
Based on what you said, I fully believe that, you know, well, number one, things are way more complex than what we can probably ever comprehend. But I do believe that I don't end here. Like, you know, this is not the end of me. And the idea of being able to think, you know, outside the realms of time and space and all of those things, like we can do that, can't we? So like there's so much more to our mind than just being in this head. So I'm quite convinced that, you know, maybe I shouldn't get into this in a business discussion, but I'm quite convinced that when I die, that's not going to be the end of me, that I'm just going to transform into something else, you know, a different kind of energy and a different kind of form. Obviously not my body, but my mind, I'm sure. And I like to think that as well. I do like to think that there is more to us human beings than we can really understand.
I do as well, and it's really dangerous to say here being at the university, you know, so don't say it.
No, I won't.
No, I do.
Okay, we'll keep that to ourselves then.
Yes. Within this Zoom talk.
Brilliant. Well, look, I could literally talk to you all day, but I guess I probably need to let you go. But you've just given me so many insights, and actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to rewatch this several times, because I think there are so many important clues in this in terms of how we can think and just like little things that we can do to actually smarten up our thinking. And at the end of the day, I think all the value we create comes from our thinking. And
right.
So
I agree. Yes.
You know, we can learn a lot from science. I think, you know, I don't know if it's the right way of saying it, but the humility of science, the way that it does query everything, or at least if you're a good scientist, you know,
at
rather
least
than us just go ahead with sometimes our big egos and just think we know everything and, you know, make crazy decisions. But no,
there might be some things that you can learn from science.
I'm sure
in that respect, and I think also that we can learn from business, just to put that on the table as well, because after all, the fallacy of a scientist will be that we don't necessarily produce too much if we don't have to, because we all ask all these questions without necessarily finding all the answers always. So in some sense, we also need some of this pressure. So I think it goes both ways, though.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There's a new conference for you. When you finished organizing this one you're organizing now, you'll have to organize a sort of astro business conference where we can.
That's right. That's a new concept.
Yeah, it is. Brilliant. Okay, Ben.
Astro meets business.
Yeah, it could be fascinating. I'm convinced of it. So
definitely.
Yeah, well, look, I'm really excited. I hope that your TED talk comes out on YouTube soon. I hope, and I'm sure it will, and I hope it does, because I'd love to see it again. It was very beautiful. I loved, you know, the way you delivered it and the message that you gave. So I'm proud of that. It was just fantastic, and I want to wish you a fantastic weekend, and good luck with the birth of your little boy. So
thank you, and thank you for the voice again.
Yeah, well, my pleasure, and thanks for joining me. And have a